Here at TekamoHD, we make sure your fleet of heavy equipment is always in its best state. Over the course of several videos, we've brought over Keith, an expert in heavy equipment maintenance and repairs, to show you how you can service your machinery yourself. We sat him down in this video to answer some of the most commonly asked questions asked relative to your excavator, skid steer, track loader, and all around heavy equipment needs.
The most common cause of final drive failure, there's a few different types. One is these tracks on an excavator, they're in mud, they're in water. Sometimes water can get past the seal. Your oil will turn milky. It dilutes the oil, makes it water contaminated, and it's not a very good lubricant water. There's a dual cone seal in there. Sometimes you can get wire wrapped around that. It ruins the seal. All the oil comes out. Now you have no lubricity in the gearbox, and it will fail, and that will be a catastrophic failure. It will be a replacement only. Lack of servicing will cause final drive failure as well. If you don't service it in proper intervals, when it needs to be done, the oil gets old, the oil gets thick, it starts to dry out, and then it doesn't lubricate anything. The concept is very similar for all other brands of machines and all other styles of machines. If it has a sprocket and a track, the sprocket drives the track. It will need some kind of lubrication in the final drive. A lot of smaller machines, they'll use the hydraulic oil as lubrication, so you won't be able to change it at all. Bulldozers, skid steers, they will have final drives with gearboxes in them where you're going to need to change the gear oil. I know John Deere's have plugs on the outside, just like excavators. Some Bobcats, you have to pull the sprocket off. On machines like that, I would consult a professional to come in and do that for you. The types of oil used for your final drive will depend on the manufacturer specs. You can consult your manufacturer, your dealership, or your maintenance manual if you have one for your machine. There's different types of oils as far as thickness values, 30 weight oil, non-detergent, 80-90 oil, and those are going to depend definitely on the manufacturer of the machine. There's also synthetic oils and there's also mineral oils. The machine will come factory with a mineral oil in it most of the time. Some guys will switch over to synthetic oil. Consult your manufacturer again for those issues. If you are thinking of putting synthetic oils in your machine after, it's not a bad idea. It's a personal opinion. I've had issues in the past with a customer putting synthetic oil in his machine when it called for mineral oil. And when I went to service the final drive, there was a lot of metal filings in the unit. I suggested putting mineral oil back in, so we put mineral oil back in. The next time we serviced the final drive, a lot less metal filings, and then the next time we serviced it, there was no metal filings coming out anymore, so we stuck with mineral oil in that machine. But again, consult your manufacturer, do a little bit of research on the type of oil and the brand of oil you plan on putting in. How often should final drive oil be changed is a question, it's consult your manufacturer, consult your maintenance manual. Some machines call for 1,000 hours, some machines call for every 2,000 hours. I, as a professional, like to do it every 500 hours. The reason for that, yes, it is over-servicing it, but gear oil or 30 weight oil or whatever the manufacturer suggests is a lot cheaper than a final drive. If you miss a service, if the oil gets dirty, when you service a final drive, not 100% of the oil comes out. You get about 90% of the oil that comes out, 10% is left. That oil starts to get old and contaminate the new oil. If you service it every 500 hours, you most likely will never run into an oil contaminated issue in your machine. The conditions final drive oil should be changed more often is jobs that travel a lot. If you're walking up and down roads, if you're grabbing a scoop of dirt, traveling to dump that dirt into a hole or into a truck and then traveling back to get another scoop. Those are excessive and heavy duty severe conditions. Please change your final drive earlier than your specs say. If it's sitting on a topsoil pile and it's not traveling very much and you're just sitting there and baling dirt, you don't have to change it as often. When I change final drive oils, when I do any maintenance on a machine, I always look out for different things in the area that I'm working on. In this case, on a final drive, you have a sprocket attached to it, so I always have a look at the sprocket that's bolted to the final drive. Is it worn out? Is it breaking apart? Is it chipping? Is there dirt getting stuck in there and not coming out the reliefs and the track pads? Those are things that I always look for. Overfilling a hydraulic oil tank in an excavator or any machine that uses a hydraulic tank for that matter is not a good idea. They've done a lot of research and development on how much oil should go in a tank. There's a reason that there is air above the oil. There's a one-way check valve on most hydraulic tanks that allows air in but not out. So when you fire up your machine and you run the hydraulics, the oil level will go down, sucking air in, and then as the oil level comes back in, depending on the position of the hydraulic cylinders, it creates a positive pressure in that tank. And the reason for that positive pressure is to put a little bit of pressure on the oil to push it into your pumps. Your pumps don't have to work so hard to pull the oil out of the tank, and it creates a lot longer life for the pumps in your hydraulic system. If you overfill it, that positive pressure becomes greater and it will actually start to push out your case drain seals and your input shaft seals, so it's not a good idea to fill it up over the manufacturer spec. Diesel engine oil always seems to get black right away, even after you just change it. That's the dirty soot of the diesel. It gets past the rings a little bit, gets into your engine oil, and it's the unburnt carbon which turns black. It's not a bad thing, all diesels do it. As long as you stay within your manufacturer spec of changing your engine oil and filter, you'll never have an issue with it. Your primary and secondary air filters need to be installed correctly and need to create a good seal. If any air can get past that air filter without going through it, it will get into the engine, and that's dirty air getting into the engine, and they call it dusting an engine. It starts to sand the rings down, starts to sand the cylinders down, you lose compression. Very, very important to make sure your air filters have a tight seal and they're the correct air filters for this unit. You don't want to fill up the engine oil too full. There is on every machine a dipstick. It has an add mark, which is a low mark, and it has a top mark. You don't want to go overfill on the top mark for a couple of reasons. One, as the crankshaft spins, it's really close to that oil level. If it starts hitting that oil, it starts pushing that oil up into the cylinders, there's too much oil in the cylinders, and as the rings come down to wipe the oil off, there's too much for it and it'll get into the cylinder and it can cause a runaway engine. A runaway engine is where you have no throttle control. It starts running on the excess engine oil and it will run away in excess of RPM and it will cause catastrophic failure to your engine. Lack of maintenance on a machine is not very good. I do see it fairly common on machines that get used on farms. You know, they don't keep track of how many hours are on a machine. You know, every component on this machine has a maintenance schedule: final drives, engine, hydraulic filters, hydraulic systems. If you go above and beyond what the manufacturer spec is, you start creating problems where you're going to start getting leaks. You know, that's going to be the start. You're going to start getting failures. Some of them can be cheap, some of them can be expensive. As the oil breaks down, the additives in the oil break down, they start losing their lubricity. They start not being able to do the job that they were designed to do. Filters, as they get plugged up, they can't do the job that they were designed to do, and therefore the oil doesn't get filtered, the air doesn't get filtered, and your machine starts getting damage. If you mix AW32 and AW46, it's not a bad thing, depending on where you are and your temperatures, your air temperatures of outside. AW32 is a thinner oil than AW46. So in areas that are colder climates all day, you want to run a thinner oil, which is an AW32. Areas like Arizona, Texas, places that are very hot, you want to run an AW46. It's a little bit of a thicker oil. It doesn't thin out as much when it gets to operating temperature, and it helps the hydraulic system stay lubricated. As far as mixing them, it's not a bad thing as long as you consult the manufacturer spec on the oil itself. Synthetic does not want to mix with mineral, so you want to stick with what you have in your hydraulic tank. Mixing them is not an issue at all.